You're listening to episode 12 of the Inspired Entrepreneur's Guide podcast. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Inspired Entrepreneur's Guide, the podcast that encourages you to stop dreaming and start doing. I'm your host, Darlene. Well, this is season 2 of the Inspired Entrepreneur's Guide, and I am so excited to be back. I had a couple months off. I'm back now, refreshed and ready to go. Before diving into this week's interview, I wanted to tell you what you can expect from Season 2. Not going to stray away from Season 1 too much. You will be hearing my interviews with entrepreneurs who offer to share their inspiring entrepreneurial journeys and offer some expert advice. However, this is Season 2, and I kind of think of Season 2 as the second step to starting your business or rebranding or refocusing your energy somewhere else that you're more passionate about. When you're starting out, a lot of times marketing scares you, or it scared me. I'll take this a little bit personal. When I started out, marketing scared me. I didn't know which way to turn, what marketing channels benefited me and my business. And it was a struggle. And if you're coming from corporate America, or you were a stay-at-home mom or dad, or someone that just is not comfortable marketing yourself and your services, Season 2 will offer you inspiring stories to help motivate and inspire you to take action. They'll also include some marketing tips and tools and advice from entrepreneurs in the marketing industry or have expertise in the area of marketing. Okay, so with all of that being said, let's dive into this week's interview. This week, I get to share with you my joyful experience with chatting with Bonnie Marlewski-Probert. She's an author of more than 20 books and more than 1,000 magazine articles internationally. She's worked in the horse world for more than 20 years as a teacher, horse trainer, writer, and barn owner. During our conversation, she shared with me how her love for horses came about and how she transitioned from working in corporate America to owning a barn. So I'm telling you, it's an inspiring and fun journey that she took me on, and I can't wait to share with you. She shared many life lessons that she experienced by being a horse trainer and owning a barn. And then she later discussed with me and shared with me how and why she started a publishing business and what she's doing now by helping nonprofits market and grow their business. Finally, the tool or tidbit that you get to take away today is how to get that book about your story or about an area of expertise that you've always wanted to write about, how to get that down on paper. She provides 2 sound tips for getting that story out. Here is my inspiring, fun, and joyful conversation with Bonnie Marlewski-Probert. Bonnie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, great. So I want to dive right into the questions, and we were talking about your background in the horse world, teaching, training, running a barn, and also being a writer for the horse industry.
Yes.
So I have 2 questions. The first, just because barns and horses intrigue me deeply, how did you get into that world? How did you get into the world of horses?
My parents owned the only grocery store in our little town in northern Illinois, and we had a family friend who was into polo ponies. And so I was very fortunate at 8 years old to have this woman, a mentor of mine, introduce me to riding. And in the next 2 or 3 years, I had that woman and a trainer, a man who was teaching me how to ride. And the 2 of those people introduced me into the safe way to ride and taught me everything I needed to know. So over the next 10 years, I really had the opportunity to get heavily involved in the horse world. And beyond the horse thing, I was a latchkey kid before a latchkey kid existed. My parents owned a business. They were in it, from sun up till sundown. And so there were 4 of us in the house who were pretty much like feral cats. running loose. And so I was very fortunate that these two adults came into my life, took me under their wing, and brought me into the horse industry. And that set the tone for everything I've done since.
Awesome. So later in life, you did own you ran a barn and did teaching and training. Because of your parents owning a business, did that lead you to wanting to have a business of your own in that respect? Or did their experience kind of mold you and say, well, I want to do this and horses are my passion?
Let me say that I took a job in corporate America for a very major, big oil company, the biggest one in the world, and I ran their computer systems in a Chicago office for 7 years.
Wow.
And during that time, I had the opportunity to get at that point, I had the opportunity to live in a family-owned business and to live in a corporate world, and those two worlds could not be more different.
Right.
So after 5 years in the corporate world, and during that whole time I was still riding horses, I was a catch rider, I was showing horses, I owned horses, I was still working at barns, but my job was in the corporate world. So at 5 years in, I sat down with my boss, and my exact words to my boss was, I've never done this before, but I quit. I had no plan. What I knew, though, and the reason why I quit the job at that point was because the week before I was pulled into the human resources office, and across the desk from me, dressed very similar to me in very similar stylish business clothing, was a woman who leaned across the desk and said to me with great pride, in just a few more years, you will be fully vested in our stock option program. Now, for normal people, you would have been elated. For me, literally, the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I was it was like a cold streak of terror ran through me, and I thought, oh, no, if you stay, you will be trapped here forever. So, I knew that I always wanted to run my own barn, and I thought, you're in your 20s. This is not something you can do when you're 60.
Right.
It's a very physical job. So
I
thought, if you're going to do this, you need to do this now. And if you wait 3 more years until this magical event happens, it's not going to be an option. So what I did was I went into my boss the next week. I said I quit, and that was the end of that. And I left, had no plan, but I did have stock options, and I had savings programs that I had amassed over those years, and that's what funded the barn. And the joke was that I did not want to do it in Chicago because Chicago was a tricky market, so I decided to move to Indiana, where I had never stepped foot in my entire life. But I thought, well, how hard could this be? And the barn that I bought had been empty for 2 years. There was no business, and it was in a small, farming community. So, long story short, it was, to say the least, it was a struggle to get that barn up and running, because the kind of barn that I wanted to run was not supported by the local community, and that had nothing to do with me, and they were lovely people. It was just, as I mentioned earlier, the farmers there would say to me, little lady, we don't own anything we can't eat. So when I would say, wouldn't it be nice to get your daughter a pony, they would just look at me like I was from Mars, right? It was like, a complete disconnect there. And then when I would suggest showing their animals, they would say, we're in the 4-H program, we show cows. We don't have any interest in horses. So it took a while to sort of get everybody on board and get them all excited about it and get them going, and that was a wonderful thing. So in answer to your question, was it an asset to have come from a business-owning family? In fact, from a work ethic standpoint, yes. I understood from a family business that you get up before the sun gets up and you don't go to bed until the sun goes way past down. Right. And that you cater to every customer that pulls in your driveway, and it has nothing to do with you. You don't have to like them. You're just there to serve them. I understood that was an asset. The downside, though, was that my parents completely sacrificed themselves. And that was a handicap when I went into business. Right. I was the guy who said, if you're not making enough money working 12 hours a day, work 14. Which was the mistake. And it wasn't until I lost my backside years and years later when the economy took a turn that it dawned on me that that particular lesson I learned from my parents was not a good one. That the idea that you just work harder and everything will work out was actually not good advice.
Right.
You know, and as any entrepreneur knows, if you're the guinea pig on the wheel and you just keep running faster,
right, yeah,
you're not getting anywhere.
Right.
You know, it has to be smarter, strategic, well thought out, planned ahead, and executed. That gets you where you need to go.
Exactly. Well, it's a hard life lesson because it's one that you can only learn through experience in a way, because even though you might see it and know it, like had it been the opposite, where they, you know, the role models when you were young, you know, were working smarter, you might have still tripped up and made those mistakes anyway. So they're experiences that you need to learn from. What other life lessons did your experiences by running a barn and being in the horse industry have you applied to other areas of your business and your life?
The positive thing about having those two mentors in the horse industry was that I had the opportunity to spend thousands of hours on the backs of hundreds of different horses. And as a child, you know, size-wise, and as a woman, size-wise, you figure out really quickly that you are never going to be able to force a 1,200-pound animal to do anything. So, right? So, I mean, it's, you know, in business, you might trick yourself into thinking, I can convince customers to come into my store, whatever it is. But in the horse world, you learn really quick, you can't force anybody to do anything. So what I learned from the horse side was lessons about patience, about tenacity, about commitment, about follow-through, that they were all essential qualities to be a good horseman. And incidentally, they were also essential qualities to become a solid business person or a spouse or a good parent. And so I was fortunate that I learned those lessons in the saddle. And I have used those lessons every day since.
Awesome. It's amazing when you think about it, what, you know, some people listening to this might think, wow, you know, I would have never thought of that from, you know, the perspective of coming from a horse industry or an industry I'm not familiar with. But there are lessons to be learned in almost any industry, and I love how you applied those to your business and future endeavors.
Yeah, I think people, well, let me say that I often say to people when I'm doing speaking engagements that everything in life is a metaphor for everything in life. And when I say that to my British husband, he always returns to me and says, you know, no one understands that when you say that.
That's great.
They get that Scooby-Doo look on their face like, what? but the point of what I'm making is, if you're devoted to golf, all the positive, powerful life lessons you need to learn about business are out there on the golf course. If you're paying attention, they're out there on the golf course. Right. You know, it's about you hit it into the woods. Now do you lose your mind, throw the clubs, and screw up the next 8 holes? Or do you get patient, calm yourself down, get refocused, right? This is all about, you know, if you get knocked down, what do you do? Right. Do you get back up or do you get angry? Right. And which of those two serves you the best? You know, and so whether you're into golf or tennis or any sport, everything in there is a metaphor for everything you're going to be doing if you're paying attention, which is the reason why I wanted to run a barn, because I learned that connection. I learned that connection, that metaphor, when I was very young, and I thought, wow, if people just knew this, it would be so much easier for them. Right. You know, in all areas of their life. And so my focus when I was teaching in my own barn, that was the focus. So what I would say to parents is, I'm going to teach your child about tenacity and commitment and dedication and follow-through. I'm going to teach them patience. I'm going to teach them all of those powerful life lessons that will serve them well every day for the rest of their lives. And by the way, while we're doing that, they're going to learn how to kick butt and take names in a show ring. Wow. Right? But and I would say to the parents, watch your child now, because now you're going to see they're going to start doing their chores at home. The grades are going to improve at school. They're going to have more friends now because they're going to be transformed. Right. Character-wise, we're going to be transforming your child. And I would never say to the child today we're going to learn about tenacity. We never had
right.
that.
Oh yeah, no. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was through actions that they learned those. I didn't ever had to use those words at all. They just learned it through the experience that they were exposed to. And so parents would say to me all the time, "Oh my God, I can't believe my kid is doing this and positive, and the grades are up, and they made the honor roll." And I would think that I'm doing my job. Mm-hmm. They get it, you get it, we all get it. It's all good.
That's awesome. So eventually, you transitioned, and it's interesting because you said, people just need to know this, and you transitioned to publishing and writing. And so, how did you go from teaching children and people about, tenacity and patience through horseback riding, and you transitioned it eventually into writing and sharing stories through the written word? How did that transition come about, and how was Whitehall Publishing born?
I realized when I was running my own barn that there were only so many students you could teach a day. There's only so many hours, so many horses, so many people. So I discovered that if you transition from, let me say, I did not intentionally ever intend to go into writing. I went into writing out of necessity because when the economy turned, I lost my backside in the barn. So I mean, and anybody that was in what was considered a luxury sport was losing their backsides at that time. Right. So okay. Yeah. So it wasn't. The point I'm making is, what on the surface looked like the biggest tragedy of my life actually turned out to be the door that opened for me to become internationally known. Instead of being in this small town in Indiana, all of a sudden I had this opportunity to write for horse magazines. So I could teach the same lessons that I was teaching to 5, 6, 7 students a day. I could now teach them to 10,000 people across the country at one go. And from the comfort of my office in a warm spot instead of a freezing cold Indiana winter. Right. So the message I want to send to entrepreneurs is, just because it looks like a train wreck doesn't mean it's a train wreck. That it actually could be the best day of your life. And it only took me 10 years to figure that out. Because for the first 9 years after that train wreck, you could not have convinced me it was anything other than a train wreck.
Right.
And even though I was publishing hundreds of articles, I had gotten book deals, I was doing how-to videos through those 9 years after the barn, if you pulled me off to the side and said, "So how's this going for you?" I would have honestly said to you, "I am so angry." I have been gypped by life.
Wow.
Yeah. So the point I'm making is, from a business standpoint, there are no good days and there are no bad days. There are just events.
Right.
What they end up being is your choice. And so, in spite of the fact that I was in my own way for 9 years after the barn, being very angry, I kept moving forward, which is another tenet of success in business, is no matter what is going on, keep moving. Right?
Just like, what's that movie? Finding Nemo. Just keep moving. Just keep moving.
Exactly. So it's all about just keep moving forward, and opportunities will open to you. And as soon as you get your head straight, you'll know to take those opportunities. But you won't see those opportunities unless you're moving forward.
Right.
So anyway, Whitehall Publishing came after I wrote hundreds of magazine articles, and I did book deals. I had a couple of book deals, and I did how-to videos and a lot of other things. And after those 2 book deals, when I realized that the 2 publishing houses, one in New York and one in Colorado, didn't have the same work ethic that I was raised with. I had contracts from them where they said I had to meet these deadlines and I had to do all these things, and I beat all those deadlines. And then they would be a year behind on their deadlines, and I thought, well, wait a minute. There's something wrong here. And so when it happened on the first publishing deal, I thought, well, it must be me. I'm the new kid. I'm the naive kid. I don't know how this works. So I signed a second deal with a completely different publishing house, and the same stuff started happening. And I thought, wait a minute. So then I asked myself, like any entrepreneur would, what would it take for me to get enough professionals around me and learn the skills that are necessary to do the business side of publishing? So I could do this without signing the book deals, because a traditional publishing contract, you sign over your rights to your story and you give away 90 to 95% of the income from the book for the life of the book.
Right.
Right. So you're making a huge sacrifice when you sign those book deals. So anyway, so it took me a couple of years to figure it out and to surround myself with professionals that I needed. And then we started the publishing house in about 1989.
Oh, wow.
And then, like most entrepreneurs, you start where you know what you're doing. You start in the niche that you're comfortable in. And then once you get really comfortable there, you start to expand out. So when I was doing magazine articles, I started in the horse industry, which is what I knew really well.
Right.
And then I thought, you know what? A how-to article is a how-to article. So if you're going to do the research for a horse-related article, why couldn't you do the research for an RV article or a dog sled company article or a science journal article or a cooking magazine or Good Housekeeping magazine? Why couldn't you do – it's the same process.
Right.
And that's what I did. So I started to explore outside and discovered I could write for any magazine, anywhere, anytime, on any topic because the methodology was the same. And so then when we started the publishing house, I thought, if you're really comfortable publishing horse-related books, why couldn't you expand that out and provide publishing to authors in other genres? Right. And following the same methodology, do your research, be sure that you're, right on point, and then produce a world-class product. And so we did that, and we've worked with hundreds of authors since then.
Oh, wow.
In all kinds of topics, from historical fiction to biographies to dog books, cat books, horse-related stuff. We've done religious books. We just finished a religious book for an author on the West Coast. And so the process is the same. It's the creative process. It's the do your due diligence. It's the do your homework. So it's like if somebody opened an ice cream store and you say, I can sell vanilla ice cream, well, then why can't you sell mint chip and chocolate and strawberry?
Right. Because, it's the same recipe. You just add a few different things.
Right.
Yeah.
But the work ethic is the same, and the machine care is the same, and the customer service is the same. So why not multiply and expand your outreach, which is what we did with Whitehall Publishing.
Right. Well, speaking of outreach, you had mentioned to me when we first connected that you enjoy helping and working with nonprofits.
Yeah.
So how did that come about, and why did you choose that niche? So talk to me a little bit about that.
As I said earlier about the two adults who came into my life as an 8-year-old, I always felt that I owed them. I still feel that I owe them.
Wow.
So the working with nonprofits was one way for me to pay it forward. And in the horse industry, I started with therapeutic riding centers.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, so there's like 600 or 800 of those in the United States, and I started working with them, and we would do book tours and book signings and, donate profits and whatever. And after I did a 5,000-mile book tour, 30 events in 30 days.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
30 days of relaxation after that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but what I noticed, I noticed a disturbing trend in that work. And what I noticed was that the nonprofits had a heart of gold and the business sense of a gnat.
Right.
And it dawned on me at that point that I could go to them every week for the rest of my life and do book signings and live events every week for the rest of my life, and it was not going to help them in the least. Because they didn't have a mailing list. They didn't have an audience. They didn't have any media going. They had nothing going on.
Right.
Right? So I don't care if, Elvis Presley came in. They weren't going to benefit because they didn't understand how to put on an event. So when I came home from that tour, I decided that, I don't want to use biblical references, but the concept of give a man a fish and he eats for a day and teach a man to fish and he,
right.
opens a sushi bar.
Right. I don't know if that's in the Bible.
No,
but
I'm paraphrasing.
That's funny.
Yeah. So anyway, so my goal was to help them open a sushi bar.
Right.
So I came home and we put together a program and a website. We put together a website called funding101.org.
Okay.
which is filled with all kinds of helpful educational information for nonprofits. And we have the option there, if they need a 501c3, we can help them get that. If they need a website, we can help them get that. If they need to get some press, we can help them get that. And then we built a program called Making Profits for Your Nonprofit, which is also on funding101.org. And that is, it's like 3 hours of audio tape and a 90-page workbook. And it is the foundation for a healthy, thriving nonprofit. It's the concept of balance, and this applies to a for-profit business as well. If you're an entrepreneur, that 14-hour-a-day workday doesn't do you any good if it's not balanced with 14 equal hours focused on building your business. And what nonprofits do is they spend 14 hours a day working in their business, but spend no time building it.
Right.
And building it means you're sending out press releases every Monday. You're building your mailing list. You're doing the Facebook, the social media, the Twitter thing. They're not spending any time doing that stuff.
Right.
And it has to be, and this is no different than a for-profit business. You know, one of the basic tenets of marketing is that it takes 3 to 5, sometimes 5 to 10 knocks on a consumer's door before they make a buying decision. Right. So when a nonprofit sends out one press release a year and scratches their head and says, I don't understand why we didn't get flooded with customers. Right. Right? It's, you know, that's the reason. And the same thing is true with an entrepreneur. If you're sending out press once in a blue moon,
right,
you're not going to get the traction that you need. And if you understand that it takes 3 to 5, sometimes 5 to 10 knocks, depending upon what your product is, you have to do those back to back. You know, so my joke with nonprofits is every Monday, come hell or high water, I don't care if you had a tornado take your house out the night before, every Monday, come hell or high water, you're sending out press. No excuses, you're sending out press. And if you can't get that done, take a weekend off and write the press releases ahead. You know, there's plenty of programs out there, MailChimp, Constant Contact, whatever, that you can use for free and preset your press. Right. So this idea that I don't have time to do this isn't acceptable anymore, because then what you're essentially saying is you don't have time to be successful. Right. Right. Yeah. So it's a balance, whether it's a for-profit or a nonprofit. It's a balancing act. And so, and I say this to myself all the time. If I'm going to donate an hour of my time to a nonprofit, I must donate an hour of my time to building my own business. So it's not 1 hour, it's 2 hours. And if I'm not willing to do that, don't donate. You can't afford to donate the hour. Right. Wow. It's really tempting to say, wow, I really like that part of the business. I think I'll go spend all my time over there. Yeah. And whether it's for-profit or nonprofit, I've said to business owners all along, I learned this when I ran a barn. There are 1,000 things involved in running a successful business. One of them has to do with the part that you fell in love with. The other 999 are the business of business, and without those, you've got no leg to stand on. Right. So if you don't like to handle the business of business, then get somebody in who does. Because without that, you're toast. It's like growing a garden, you know. If you like to plant seeds, that's great. But if you don't want to water them and you don't want to weed them, then that garden doesn't stand a chance. And you can keep going back there and planting every single year and hope for a different outcome, but it's not going to be a different outcome. Right. So either stop or get a landscaper. Exactly. So, yeah. Yep. Exactly. That's the trick. Yep. Everything in life is a metaphor for everything in life. Exactly. Exactly. We're full circle. Full circle moment. That's amazing. Yeah. So anyway, so I work with a lot of nonprofits, and just like we discovered with writing, I started with therapeutic writing centers, and then I thought, you know what? Dog and cat shelters need the same help. Right. There's like 11,000 of those in the U.S. Totally. So then we've expanded to beyond that. Now we're outside of the animal industry. I mean, we still work inside the animal industry, but now we're talking to art groups, you know, people in the arts, and working with them because they all share the same issues, which is we love that one piece of the 1,000-piece puzzle, and we all believe that if we really get good at that one piece of the 1,000-piece puzzle, the other 999 pieces will magically take care of themselves on their own. And physics will prove that don't work. Right.
So what is that website again, one more time, where that you have set up, for helping the nonprofit?
It's called funding101.org. Yeah, so you'll find the Making Profits for Your Nonprofit program out there, and we have a Petri cookbook program that we offer that people can,
oh, wow.
So if they have like a dog shelter, this is a great
right.
during adoptions. Yeah, so we have lots of things out there we work really hard to put together to help these guys. But as you know from working with entrepreneurs, if an entrepreneur is not ready to grow,
right,
you can drag them forward kicking and screaming, but the minute you let them go, they're running back to wherever they're safe.
Exactly.
So, so we have all the tools there, and when they're ready, they're there.
Right, exactly. So speaking about ready to grow, the whole entire idea and premise of this podcast is aimed to inspire and motivate people to grow, to take that step and start their business. So I want to kind of bring that back around to your writing background and your help with nonprofits, because I think it could be applicable to the people listening in. So the question is relating to sharing the story or sharing your business story. What's one piece of advice or a tool that you can share with those people today? So what's one thing that they can do to share their story or their unique selling point for their business?
Whether it's a for-profit or a nonprofit business, you have a story to tell. You should tell the story because other people will benefit from your experience. And P.S., it's a secondary income stream. So there's two tips I would give to anybody. One is know who your what I call logical reader is, but if you're an entrepreneur, it's your logical customer. If you're a nonprofit, it's your logical supporter if you're looking for donors. Get a picture of that person in your head. So in the case of the entrepreneur, if they're writing a book, so that you absolutely know every word that's going down on the page is written for that person.
Right.
So the little sort of example of that is, let's say you're writing a how-to book about tying your shoes, something really simple. If you wrote that book for 6-year-olds versus rocket scientists,
right,
the steps are the same, but the way you write that book is completely different.
Right.
So the trick is, if you want to hit home run book, you really want to know before you put pen to paper, you really want to be clear on who is your target audience here. And then you're serving them, you're writing for them. And that's no different than if you're running an ice cream store. Where do you advertise? You advertise where your demographic is most commonly found, and you can't do that well unless you know who those people are first.
Right.
So that's tip number one. Tip number two is, if you're thinking about writing a book, this is what I say to all authors. Take the back of your electric bill or phone bill envelope and outline the 5 to 10 takeaways you want your reader to have in their heart after they read your book. Just 5 is good, 10 is okay, but they'll all fit on the back of that envelope. And I suggest using the back of the envelope because if you said to somebody, open a doc file on your computer, it'll end up being 50 pages long and they will have no clue, right? So you write 5 to 10 things you really want to give your reader. You want them to take away and be better for the reading experience. And those become the chapters in your book.
Oh, wow.
Right? It's really simple. And then, sort of in a nutshell, each one of those becomes a doc file in your computer.
Right.
And as you're thinking of things, you open the doc file and just put one-liners in there, save the file, and go on and do your job for the day. But interestingly enough, if you do that for a couple of months, as you feel creative, you open the doc file, whichever chapter it is, and you just bang in, as Mark Victor Hansen would say from the Chicken Soup books, you puke it out on the page. Don't worry about how it's spelled. Don't worry about how it's laid out. Just puke it out on the page, save the file, and go do the rest of your day. Within a couple of months, you're going to open those files, and you're going to see that this book has actually started to take form on its own.
Right.
And from there, on the days when you don't feel particularly creative, which is for most people most days,
right,
you spell check, you lay it out, you fix your grammar a little bit, you do the mechanical side. So what I say to authors is writing a book is 10% creative, 90% mechanical. On the days when you feel creative, on the moments when you feel creative, write it down, save it, and then the rest of the time you're just fixing whatever you wrote before. You're just tidying things up. So those are the two tips I would offer to somebody.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. It's refreshing that you simplify that process, because as someone that's sat down to try to write down a story multiple times, in my head it's just sit down every day and be creative, or kind of make myself be creative every day. But it doesn't have to be that way.
Well,
so
it
it's refreshing.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, it doesn't work.
Right. It doesn't.
It doesn't work because your brain is creative 10% of the time.
Right.
So if you say from 4 o'clock every afternoon until 9 o'clock, I'm going to sit in front of this computer and by God, something better happen.
It's not.
It's not. And as an entrepreneur, if they don't already understand this, should understand that you are your best employee and your best boss.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to recognize that there's two parts of you as an entrepreneur. There's the employee side, who's supposed to be sitting down and writing the book, and there's the boss who comes in and says to the employee, Bob, you're not feeling creative today. Let's go wash the dishes instead. It'll come. It'll be great when it gets here, right? You got to be that, because creative is not something you can just spill out on a page.
No, it's not.
So when writers say it's torture to write, I think, well, because you've got the wrong time frame.
Right.
You're trying to force creativity, and that's not going to get her done.
Right.
Yeah. So if you keep paper in your pocket, keep paper in your purse, and when you come up with an idea, scribble it down. If you're really talented, keep a tape recorder. I don't do that, but you could. And just jot down the notes and then let it go. Right. And when you have time, sit down and just knock that stuff out into the chapters and let it start to build itself. This is like growing a garden. You can't plant the seeds and then stare at them and get mad that they're not growing faster.
Right.
But instead, what you can do is nurture them by watering them and fertilizing them and making sure they have everything they need, and let that creative process grow on its own. And interestingly enough, once you get in the habit of treating yourself better, right, instead of beating yourself up for not producing enough, you nurture yourself for whatever it is you did produce, everything in your life gets easier. It's not, gee, I should have been better today, and I should have done this, and I should have done that. It's not the shoulda, woulda, couldas. It's the, wow, look what I got done. This is great.
Right.
Yeah, it's nurturing instead of forcing. And with an entrepreneur, obviously you got to roll up your sleeves and you got to put in the hours and you got to put in the work. But if you're beating yourself up all day long and saying you didn't work hard enough, you didn't close that deal, why would anybody? I always ask people this question: if you're your best employee and your best boss, what employee in their right mind would keep working for you if you treated them that way? So you really have to be kind to yourself, whether you're starting a business or running a nonprofit or as a writer.
Awesome. Bonnie, thank you so much for being a guest on the show and for the wonderful conversation. It was great talking with you.
I had a great time. I appreciate you doing this.
Thank you so much, Bonnie, for being a guest on the podcast. You can learn more about Bonnie and find links to her websites on episode 12's show notes found at dvpodcasts.com. Speaking of the web and the podcast, you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and now you can also find the podcast on TuneIn Radio. In addition, you can subscribe to the Inspired Entrepreneur's Guide email list. As a subscriber, you will receive email notifications of new podcast episodes, some tools, and special goodies that only subscribers of the email list will receive, including a free copy of my ebook, The Inspired Entrepreneur's Guide, a guide to living and growing successfully. The book is a journaling workbook that you can utilize to help inspire and spark your entrepreneurial soul. If you'd like a free copy of the ebook, just head over to dvpodcasts.com, click on the subscribe link, and sign up for the Inspired Entrepreneur's Guide email list. That's all I have for you this week. Be inspired by the most important person in your life, you. Until next time, this is Darlene Victoria, signing out.